Do you find that every time that you go to create a mood board for your brand that you feel so pulled in different directions? That you like so many different styles and you come across one thing on Pinterest, you fall in love with it, but then you come across something else and they don't all fit together for one type of mood board or one type of style because you just love all these different things and you feel like you're trying to piece together all these different aesthetics and styles that you love. So how do you actually put together a mood board that feels cohesive and feels like it all fits together? Well, that's what we're going to look at in this video. Now, before we dive in, if you'd like to learn more about how to make design easier, if you've been trying to work on your branding and your graphics and you're always finding it frustrating and taking up so much of your time, make sure that you check out my free workshop, The 4 Secrets to Make Design Easier, where I share with you what you need to be doing if you want to make designing for your own brand easier. You'll find the link to it in the description below. So you've been trying to create a mood board for your brand and you just feel like you can't create something that fits together and is cohesive. Now, probably what you're doing at the moment is you've been going straight to Pinterest, looking for inspiration, and it's just basically based on what comes up that day, what beautiful pictures you come across and you fall in love with. But that's a dangerous way to be creating a mood board for your brand because it's all about what just shows up that day and what takes your fancy, what the algorithm thinks you're going to like. And it's not actually based on anything else. When you create a mood board, the first step is not to go jumping in and start looking for inspiration right away. The first step is actually getting clear on what your brand is to communicate because you want your branding to actually communicate a message. So before you even look for that visual inspiration, I want you to stop and actually think about what should my brand communicate? So this is things like your brand story, your vision, your why, your mission, your brand values, who your audience is, what you offer. Really think about all those things and the message you're actually trying to put out there. Now that you've worked out your brand message, what you want to do is start pulling out the key words. So really look through everything you've written about your brand, about the messaging and story and everything that you want to communicate and convey through your brand, and look for the key words. What are those key things? It could be keywords or short phrases, anything that's really summing up that message that you're trying to convey. Then what you're going to do is now go and do your visual research using those key words. So now you've got your keywords that are what you're trying to communicate with your brand. Now you're going to go do your visual research using those keywords. So it's not about just what pops up and what takes your fancy, but rather you're doing some active visual research, trying to find things that help communicate that message. So for example, if one of your words was calming and you decided to do some visual research on Pinterest, you could type in calming aesthetic, something like that, and start to see what pops up. And that's going to help you find things that are more actually communicating that message. Then as you look through those images, you can find things that feel like that right fit for your brand too. So what feels calming but also ties into other parts of your brand messaging. And then you're going to find images that really communicate the message of your brand rather than doing a really broad search, just seeing what you find and what comes up that day. You're really searching those keywords and starting to find visuals that represent it and really digging around and looking for things that you feel are the right fit for the feeling that you're trying to convey. Now, you don't have to do your visual research just on Pinterest. There's a lot of different places you can do visual research. So you can go on Google image search, you can go on places like Flickr, you can go to stock image sites, you can even physically go look through magazines and things like that. Anywhere that you can find images, and even more so if you're able to actually search, so search for those keywords. Now, if you're looking through things like magazines, think about the audience for that magazine. So are they similar to your audience? Because then it's more likely that you'll be able to find things that might be relevant. So it's not necessarily about the topic of that magazine, but rather who it's for. And is that audience a similar type of audience? And then it's more likely you might find some things in there that could be helpful. As you go about your visual research, don't feel like straight away you need to cull and get really specific and curate all the images. Start broad because then you're not going to cut off anything that could potentially be perfect. Start broader and just basically just get all those images together. You can put them on something like a secret Pinterest board or save them in a folder on your computer, whatever is going to work well for you so that you've got them all in one place. Then once you've gathered all that imagery, then you can go into curate mode where you start to cut it down and refine. When you're doing this, you now have to be a little bit more ruthless. You now have to think what things work well together and what things have you got too much of. So if you've got a lot of images that convey a similar message, so they're all sort of very similar, you want to just pick the one that's that's perfect. So the one that you feel best conveys that message or best ties into your brand, and just use that. You don't need lots of the same thing. You may still want to keep it somewhere in a folder just for your own reference or for further inspiration for you personally, but that inspiration board for your brand, you really want to refine down to really curate something that really gives that overall feeling very quickly with just a few images. We don't want to overload and go overboard. You also want to be sure that your finished board has variety, so it's showing different aspects of your brand. That's why you don't want too much repetition in one area. So you may want an image that helps convey who your audience is. You may want an image that helps convey the feeling you want to create. You may want an image that helps represent your brand values. So really think about what each image is conveying and making sure that you've got some variety in there. So you're showing all these different aspects of what you're trying to communicate. And then you want to make sure too that those images work well together. We're really curating here. We're making sure these images all look nice together. They don't feel like they're very different aesthetics and different styles. So that's where you're culling too. If something doesn't fit quite as well with these images, you don't want to use it. You want to find ones that all work well together. And this is where color also comes into play. So while at this stage you haven't worked out your exact brand colors, you do want to have an idea of the general type of color you might be looking for. So for example, if you decided, well, I want one of my brand colors to be green. I haven't really set on what kind of green just yet, but you know that maybe I'm going to have images that all have a little bit of green in them. And that way it starts to set that tone, and they also work really well together. So you're beginning to set a color tone there without getting too specific yet about what your final colors are. Now, once you've culled it down and curated the final images that you want to use, you now want to put your board together in a way that also represents your brand. So for example, if your brand is very clean and minimal, you want to be creating a mood board that feels very clean and structured. So everything nice and square and neat and laid out beautifully. Whereas if your branding leans more towards a more layered and messy style, you'd want to create a mood board that has that feeling too. You might want things more layered on top of each other, all different sizes, maybe some ripped bits of paper here and there, and really create more of that feeling. And if you've got maybe a handmade brand, you might even want to print it all out and put layered textures on top and things like that. So the way you actually lay out your final board also helps create that overall mood and feel as well. So have fun working on your brand mood board, and if you'd like to learn more about making design easier so you can become your own designer and DIY your graphics with confidence, then make sure that you check out that workshop I mentioned earlier. You'll find the link below in the description. And of course, if you want to learn more about branding, graphic design and creativity, then be sure to subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you next time.